There's a brutal truth that most of us only realize when we've already walked halfway through life. People are not weak because they were born weak. They become weak because they are carrying too many emotions that were never allowed to see the light of day. What exhausts us is not what happens on the outside, but what we keep buried within. The anger we never spoke. The sadness we never let fall as tears. The fears we never dared to name. None of these feelings ever disappear. They hide in the dark corners of our minds, slowly eroding the inner strength we once had. We grow up with a distorted definition of strength. Strength, they told us, is never crying. It's never complaining. It's smiling even when your heart is shattering. It's saying, "I'm fine," even when you can barely breathe inside. And so, we learn to suppress. We learn to hide our emotions as if they are stains we must scrub away. We build walls so high that no one can see what's really happening within us. But no one ever taught us that emotions are not meant to be destroyed. They are signals, the language of the soul trying to communicate with us. When we suppress them, they don't disappear. They transform. Anger swallowed down becomes irritability and rage over nothing. Sadness denied turns into numbness, apathy, and the loss of motivation. Hidden fear becomes over-control, a constant state of tension that we don't understand. Have you ever had days like that? Days where you feel completely drained even though you haven't done much. Days when a single careless word from someone triggers an outsized reaction. Days when you feel nothing at all toward the things that once made your heart come alive. That's not weakness. That's your repressed emotions trying to speak. It's a sign that your inner strength is being drained by the very feelings you thought you'd thrown away. A psychologist once compared repression to trying to hold a ball underwater. You can press it down with all your strength, but the pressure will only build. The harder you push, the more exhausted you become. And eventually, the ball will shoot back up with more force than before. Emotions work the same way. We can push them down to seem okay for a moment, but they will always return. And when they do, they might destroy everything in their path. The result is a life lived in weakness, not because we lack strength, but because that strength is trapped behind layers of emotions we never allowed ourselves to release. When anger is buried, we lose the ability to set boundaries. When sadness is swallowed, we lose the capacity for deep connection. When fear is denied, we stay inside our comfort zones and never grow beyond them. And so, day by day, we live as faded versions of ourselves, not because we can't be stronger, but because we've imprisoned our strength in a cage of suppressed feelings. If you pause and look deeply into your own life, you might see it everywhere. In the way you say, "I'm fine," even when you're not. In the way you try to please others to avoid conflict. In the way you refuse to cry, even when your heart is begging for release. And with every one of those moments, a piece of your power is quietly stolen from you. The irony is painful. What we believe makes us strong, hiding our emotions, is exactly what makes us weaker with each passing day. Because real strength is not measured by how well you can deny what you feel. Real strength is measured by your willingness to face those emotions, to understand the messages they bring, and to let them pass through you instead of imprisoning you. So before we go deeper into this journey, ask yourself this. Am I living a weaker version of myself, not because the world outside is too harsh, but because I am carrying too much inside that has never been released? And if, deep down, the answer is yes, then maybe now is the time to change. Maybe now is the time to reclaim the strength you once lost. No one is born knowing how to repress emotions. As children, we cry when we're sad, we scream when we're angry, we cling to someone's arms when we're scared. Our feelings flow naturally, like breath itself. But slowly, piece by piece, the world teaches us to hide. Maybe the first time you cried, someone told you, "Stop being so weak." Maybe you were punished for expressing anger. Maybe your fear was mocked and labeled as cowardice. Those moments happen over and over until your mind builds a silent rule. Emotions are dangerous. Showing them is a sign of weakness, and if you want to be loved or accepted, you must bury them. This is how emotional conditioning begins. Every time your feelings are dismissed, your mind builds another wall of defense. Eventually, you don't even have to try to suppress them. It becomes automatic. You stop showing sadness because you expect it to be ignored. You stop expressing anger because you fear rejection. You stop sharing your fears because you believe they make you unworthy. And over time, layer by layer, those buried emotions become the bricks that build a wall between you and the world. At first, it seems like this protects you. Hiding your emotions helps you avoid conflict, judgment, or more pain. But what you don't realize is that the same walls built to protect you also trap you. When you bury anger, you lose the strength to defend your boundaries. When you hide fear, you lose the courage to step beyond your comfort zone. When you silence sadness, you close the door to empathy and deep human connection. Think of your emotions as underground rivers flowing through your soul. When they're allowed to flow, they cleanse, nourish, and give you life. But when you build dams to block them, the water stagnates, turns toxic, and builds pressure. Eventually it breaks through, violently and unpredictably. That's exactly what repressed emotions do. They don't disappear, they wait. And when they finally surface, it's rarely gentle. Maybe you've snapped over something trivial. Maybe you've felt exhausted and empty for no clear reason. Maybe you've overreacted to a situation that didn't deserve such intensity. These are not random. They are the moments when the feelings you've imprisoned fight their way to the surface. And by the time they appear, they're no longer simple signals. They've become weapons turned against you. The consequences of repression go far beyond emotional fragility. They seep into every part of life. They prevent you from forming deep relationships because you can't reveal your true self. They keep you stuck in jobs, habits, and relationships that don't serve you because you fear the discomfort of change. Worst of all, they disconnect you from who you really are, because every feeling you deny is a part of yourself that you reject. The world often tells us that controlling emotions is strength. But the truth is, that's only true when control means understanding and guiding them, not suffocating them. Repression is not control. Repression is fear disguised as strength. It tricks you into believing you're in charge when in reality, you're being controlled from the shadows by the very feelings you refuse to face. And that's why so many people live their whole lives feeling weak without ever understanding why. They're not weak because they lack talent or willpower. They're weak because every time their soul tried to speak, they turned away. They're weak because they learned to silence their emotions. And when you silence your feelings, you silence your power. Look back on your life, and you'll see that weakness has never truly come from the outside. It began the moment you decided to stay silent when you needed to speak, to suppress when you needed to express, and to pretend you were fine when your soul was screaming for release. Each of those small moments, repeated again and again, has shaped you into someone who lives to please the world instead of living as who you truly are. The truth is, repression doesn't just live quietly inside of you. It spreads like a slow, invisible poison, seeping into every corner of your existence. It changes the way you think, the way you react, the way you love, and the way you see yourself. It doesn't simply weaken your emotional resilience. It shapes the very architecture of your life, piece by piece, without you even realizing it's happening. It starts small. You begin to avoid difficult conversations because you're afraid of what might come up. You say yes when you desperately want to say no, because confrontation feels too heavy. You stay silent when something bothers you, convincing yourself it's not worth the fight. And over time, this pattern solidifies. It becomes the lens through which you live, a life built around avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing what you truly need. The danger is that the longer you suppress, the more you forget who you are without the suppression. You forget what it's like to speak with conviction. You forget the freedom that comes with honest anger or the healing that follows an unrestrained cry. You even forget how to dream, because dreams require vulnerability. And vulnerability is the one thing repression never allows. And so, the life you live becomes a smaller version of the one you were meant to live. Relationships stay superficial because deep connection demands emotional honesty. Opportunities slip away because courage cannot bloom in the soil of buried fear. Even your health begins to reflect the weight of what you carry: chronic stress, fatigue, tension, sleepless nights. The body remembers everything the mind tries to forget. Repressed emotions also sabotage your self-worth in subtle but devastating ways. When you deny your feelings, you send a hidden message to yourself. My emotions don't matter, and therefore, I don't matter. That belief doesn't stay confined to the subconscious. It spills into your choices. You settle for less in love because you believe you don't deserve more. You stop chasing growth because you doubt your strength. You tolerate disrespect because somewhere deep down, you've come to believe that your voice isn't worth hearing. The greatest tragedy of repression is not just the pain it causes, it's the potential it steals. Think about the energy you expend every day just to keep your emotions locked away. The effort it takes to appear okay. The constant monitoring of what you say and how you act. The mental gymnastics of pretending. All of that is life force, creative power, emotional depth, spiritual fire that could have been spent building something extraordinary. Instead, it's wasted maintaining a facade that was never meant to exist. And here's another painful truth. The longer you repress, the more you attract people, situations, and patterns that mirror that repression back to you. If you silence your anger, you attract those who will cross your boundaries. If you hide your sadness, you find yourself surrounded by people who cannot meet you on an emotional level. If you bury your fear, you remain stuck in places that feel safe but suffocating. Life has a way of amplifying the lessons we refuse to learn, and repression is no exception. It's at this point in the journey that something crucial needs to be said. Facing your emotions does not mean being consumed by them. It's not about exploding in rage, drowning in grief, or acting on every feeling that passes through you. It's about acknowledging them, learning from them, and giving them permission to move. When you allow a feeling to exist, you disarm its power over you. But when you fight it, you give it strength. So pause here for a moment, not as a listener, but as someone who's ready to change. If any part of what you're hearing resonates with your life, if you recognize even a glimpse of yourself in these words, then let this be your turning point. Write one short promise to yourself in the comments. Just a few words that say you're ready to stop running from your emotions. It's not about anyone else reading it. It's about you telling yourself that this is the moment things begin to shift. Because here's the reality. The weight of unspoken emotions is not something you're meant to carry forever. Every tear you swallow, every boundary you ignore, every truth you silence, they're all waiting for you to set them free. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The same emotions that once made you feel weak become the very fuel that makes you strong. Anger becomes the force that protects you. Sadness becomes the doorway to empathy. Fear becomes the compass pointing you toward growth. And with every emotion you face, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was lost to repression. Piece by piece, you stop living as a prisoner of your inner world and start living as the author of your own story. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into other people's expectations and start expanding into the life you were always meant to live. Repression wants you to believe that hiding your feelings keeps you safe. But the truth is, it doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you. It convinces you that small is safe, that silence is peace, that numbness is strength. But none of those are true strength. Strength is standing in the storm of what you feel and refusing to turn away. Strength is facing the parts of yourself that scare you and choosing to love them anyway. Strength is living fully, not half alive behind emotional walls. Releasing emotions is not a single dramatic act, nor is it a moment of explosive release. And then everything is fine. It's a journey, sometimes slow, often messy, sometimes accompanied by tears, confusion, and vulnerability. But it is on this journey, step by step, that you begin to reclaim the strength that was stolen from you long ago. Because the truth is this: you cannot heal what you refuse to face. You cannot overcome the pain you still deny. And you will never find your true strength if you continue to build it on a foundation of suppression. The first and perhaps most difficult step is to allow yourself to feel. It sounds simple, but for a heart that has spent years hiding everything in the dark, it is nothing short of a revolution. Begin by pausing and asking yourself a question you may not have asked in a long time. What am I truly feeling right now? Not what you think you should feel, not what you tell others you feel, but what is actually alive within you at this very moment. It might be anger. It might be hurt. It might be a deep emptiness you've avoided for years. Simply noticing it, simply naming it, is the first step in unlocking the door. The second and equally crucial step is to stop judging your emotions. We are so often taught that anger is bad, fear is weakness, and tears are something to be ashamed of. But emotions have no morality. They are simply messages. Anger might be telling you that a boundary has been crossed. Fear might be pointing toward a part of you that needs healing. Sadness might be showing you that you're longing for love and comfort. When you start to see emotions as messengers instead of enemies, you stop fighting them and you start listening. And when you truly listen, you begin to understand yourself on a deeper level. Next, find a healthy way to release those emotions from your body. For some, that means journaling every day, pouring thoughts and feelings onto the page instead of bottling them up. For others, it might mean talking to a trusted friend or a therapist, not for advice, but simply to give those feelings a space to flow. Some people choose to walk in nature, letting their body move the energy out. Others meditate and learn to observe their feelings without judgment. However you choose to do it, the principle remains the same. Emotions must move. A feeling that's been trapped for too long becomes a burden. A feeling that's acknowledged and released becomes fuel. And something remarkable happens when you allow yourself to go through this process. At first, it might feel like a storm. You might cry unexpectedly, feel anger more intensely than ever, or face fears you thought were gone. But just like the earth after a heavy rain, things eventually settle. The air becomes clearer, the ground becomes fertile again. When emotions are allowed to flow through you, they naturally subside. You don't have to get rid of them, you only have to let them pass. And when they pass, what's left behind is clarity. You begin to understand yourself more deeply. What hurts you, what truly matters to you, and what you genuinely need. You learn how to set boundaries without guilt. You learn how to say no to what harms you, and yes, to what nourishes your soul. You learn that having emotions does not make you weak, it makes you human. And it's that humanity that becomes the root of your strength. Even more importantly, when you make peace with your emotions, you begin to connect more deeply with others. No more walls, no more masks pretending you're fine. When you allow others to see your real self, with all its vulnerability and imperfection, you give them permission to do the same. And that's where true relationships are born. Love becomes deeper. Friendships become more genuine. Trust becomes something solid, built not on performance, but on truth. Perhaps the most profound realization of all is this: the emotions you once feared are now your greatest allies. Anger teaches you how to protect yourself. Fear shows you where you're meant to grow. Hurt reminds you that your heart is still alive and capable of love. And by facing them, you begin to step out of weakness and into a version of yourself that is stronger, freer, and more authentic than ever before. Releasing your emotions is not the end of pain. It is the beginning of a new life. A life where you no longer run from yourself. A life where you are no longer afraid of the storms within. A life where you steer the ship of your soul instead of being tossed around by its waves. And when that happens, you realize something extraordinary. Your strength was never gone. It was only asleep, buried beneath layers of suppression. And now, at last, it is awakening. There is a moment, quiet, subtle, but unmistakable, that arrives after you've allowed yourself to feel, to listen, and to release. It's not dramatic. There's no explosion of light or grand fanfare. Instead, it's more like the first breath of spring after a long, harsh winter, gentle, yet full of life. It's the moment you realize that what once made you feel small and powerless was never your enemy. It was simply a part of you asking to be seen. And once you let it speak, it loses its power to control you. When you stop fighting your emotions, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, something profound happens. You begin to come home. Not to the version of you that the world demanded. Not to the persona you crafted to be loved, accepted, or praised. But to the real you. The one who has always existed beneath the layers of silence, suppression, and fear. This is the version of you that doesn't need to pretend. The version that is strong not because it hides its wounds, but because it has walked through them and emerged whole. This is what true strength really is. It's not about building walls so high that nothing can touch you. It's about learning that even if something does touch you, even if life cuts, disappoints, or breaks you, you have the capacity to feel it and still stand tall. True strength is not about being unshakable. It's about being unbreakable because you allow yourself to bend. It's about knowing that tears don't diminish your power. They deepen it. That vulnerability doesn't make you fragile. It makes you real. And that facing your pain doesn't weaken you. It liberates you. When you stop running from your feelings, you also stop running from life. Because here's the paradox. The same emotions you've spent years trying to avoid are the ones that hold the keys to everything you've been searching for. By numbing sadness, you've numbed joy. By silencing anger, you've silenced passion. By repressing fear, you've blocked the door to courage. Repression doesn't just keep pain out, it keeps life out. And you weren't born to merely survive behind emotional walls. You were born to live, fully, deeply, unapologetically alive. Imagine for a moment the person you could become if you no longer carried the weight of all that's been buried inside you. Imagine the clarity you would feel waking up each morning without resentment, without heaviness, without the quiet ache of emotions you never allowed yourself to face. Imagine the relationships you could build if you showed up as your real self, raw, imperfect, but deeply authentic. Imagine the opportunities you could embrace if fear no longer held you back. That version of you is not a fantasy. It's not a distant dream. It's the real you, and it's been waiting patiently beneath the surface all along. But the choice, as always, is yours. You can continue hiding from what you feel, continuing the cycle of suppression and living in a half version of your potential. Or you can decide, here, now, to turn and face it. To open the door you've kept locked for so long. To listen to what your anger, your sadness, your fear have been trying to tell you. And to finally walk through that door into the life that was always meant for you. Because at the end of it all, repression is not just about emotions. It's about freedom. Every emotion you've suppressed has been a piece of your freedom handed over to fear. Every tear you swallowed, every truth you silenced, every part of yourself you hid. Those were moments where you gave away your power. But the beautiful thing about power is that it's never truly gone. It waits. It waits for the moment you're ready to claim it again. And that moment can be now. As we close this journey, I want you to remember one simple truth. You were never broken. You were never weak. You were never lacking anything. Everything you needed to rise, to heal, to become whole, it's always been within you. The emotions you've spent your life avoiding are not signs of weakness. They are proof of your humanity. And within that humanity lies a strength far greater than anything you could ever fake by pretending to be fine. So, let this be the beginning. Let this be the chapter where you stop running, stop hiding, and start living with the fullness of who you are. Allow yourself to cry without shame. Speak your anger without guilt. Embrace your fear without resistance, because the moment you do, you will discover that strength isn't something you have to chase. It's something you awaken. And if this journey spoke to you, if something inside you shifted even a little, then I invite you to stay with us, because this is only the beginning. There are deeper layers to explore, more truths to uncover, and more ways to grow into the person you were always meant to be. Subscribe to this channel not just to watch more videos, but as a small promise to yourself that you are ready to keep walking this path of inner strength, healing, and truth. The world doesn't need a stronger version of you who hides everything inside. It needs the real you, the one who feels deeply, loves fiercely, and stands tall, not in spite of your emotions, but because of them. And when you finally meet that version of yourself, you will realize you were never weak. You were only waiting to be free.